In the previous series of this video, at the end I said Warren Hastings became the Governor General in 1772. Actually, it was 1773. I missed it by a year. In 1771, he was appointed as the Governor of Bengal, just like how Robert Clive was the governor, so I apologize for that. By now, we know that the major part of the company's rule in India was divided in the form of presidencies. They are Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. Let me make a new timeline from here on so that everything looks clear. Warren Hastings became the governor of Bengal in 1771. Before his arrival as the governor, the dual system of government was already there and it proved to be very defective and unsatisfactory. Remember the dual system of government that was introduced by Robert Clive in 1765 and it lasted till 1772? There was absolutely no justice during this time. The courts were the instruments of power. That's why in 1771 the company authorities asked the then governor of Bengal, Warren Hastings, to adopt certain measure and ensure that the collection of land revenue was smooth and fair to the local people. When the company acquired Divani in 1765, a year after the victory in Battle of Buxar, it created a class of middlemen who collected revenue on behalf of the company and exploited the farmers. There was a dire need for a change in regards to civil and criminal justice system. Now, keeping that in mind, in 1772, Governor Warren Hastings formulated a new system of justice, which was also known as the Judicial Plan of 1772. So what happened was the area of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa was divided into several districts. Each district was to have two courts, a criminal court which was named as Faujdari Adalat and a civil court which was named as Diwani Adalat. And each of these districts had an English collector as its head. Now you can relate how the present-day district administrative system came into existence. The idea behind the plan was to create a fair justice system by correcting the defects and to retain as far as possible the local tradition and codes of law to which the people had become accustomed. That's why the Qazis and the Pandits were asked to interpret Indian laws for the English district collectors. Basically, Hastings' plan was to create a fair system of justice for the local people. That's why we can also say that the Hastings Plan of 1772 was in many respects a boon to the people at that time, and the reason we can say so is because before 1772, under the dual administration system, there was no such thing as justice. The famous Great Bengal Famine of 1770 is a perfect example of how worse the policies of the English company were. So many people died due to hunger. It's in millions. They did not invest in India at all. There was a constant loot going on. The change in judicial system in 1772 to some extent brought back the confidence of the people in the government and the justice which they once had under the Nawab rule. But even this plan had a big defect. There were actually two huge defects in Hastings' plan. One was that now the collector acted as the administrator, the judge and the magistrate. If you see, too much power was given to a single official. And the second defect was the interpretation of the Indian law by the Qazis and the Pandits. Because relying on these native law officers while taking any judgment proved to be unsatisfactory. As you see, most of the time these Qazis and Pandits used to give an interpretation of the law which were well suited or biased to certain section of the community. And that again created a divide. In 1773, a new Supreme Court was established at Fort Williams in Calcutta. Now you must be thinking, where did this Supreme Court come from? Now if you recollect from the previous video, in 1772, Robert Clive was charged with corruption by the British Parliament because of the massive wealth he had acquired while he was in India. Because of that, the British Parliament was facing a dilemma. It was concerned about the management of the company's rule in India. On one hand, the East India Company was important to the British Empire, and on the other, it also wanted to stop the servants of the company from engaging in private trade, which they were doing for a long time. Now, in order to deal with this situation, the British Parliament came up with an act or a law for establishing certain rules and regulations for the better management of the company affairs in India. That's how the Regulating Act of 1773 was established. We'll put this date on the timeline. Now, this act also laid the foundations for a centralized administration in India. That's how the Governor General position was created. Since Bengal was the most important presidency, Governor of Bengal Warren Hastings became the obvious choice for the Governor General position. That's how the Governor of Bengal Warren Hastings became the first Governor General of British India in 1773. Now, this Regulation Act of 1773 also created a new Supreme Court about which we spoke about moments ago. So, the 1772 Judicial Plan of Warren Hastings, with support from the Regulation Act of 1773 of the British Parliament, made way for the establishment of the first Supreme Court in India and also gave a promotion to Warren Hastings by making him the first Governor General of British India. So now Warren Hastings became the first Governor General of British India in 1773, and that made him an important figure who played a significant role in the expansion of company power. So if you see, till now we only saw most of the East India Company's actions in Bengal. Not to forget, the company had strong presence in Madras and Bombay provinces. Hence, it also means that the company had a similar intention of acquiring more and more territories and expand the company rule, just like how it did in Bengal. One such place was the South Indian state of Mysore. The company branch in Madras strongly wanted control over Mysore because it controlled the profitable trade of the Malabar coast, where the company purchased pepper and cardamom. Plus, even the rulers of Mysore had anti-European views, so acquiring Mysore would turn out to be lucrative for the company. Look at this map and see how much of land was controlled by the Mysore kingdom. The company fought 4 wars against the Mysore kingdom under the name Anglo-Mysore War. The first Anglo-Mysore War was fought in 1767 to 1769 under the leadership of Hyder Ali. The company took the help of Nizam of Hyderabad, but the Nizam ended up helping the Sultan, and the company lost the war, almost losing Madras. The second Anglo-Mysore War was fought between 1780 to 84, but this time it was under the leadership of Tipu Sultan, who was the son of Hyder Ali. Hyder Ali died in 1782, that's why Tipu Sultan had to fight 3 out of 4 wars with the company. The second war was a bloody battle, and again the company lost. Tipu Sultan retook Mangalore from the British and totally stopped the export of sandalwood, pepper and cardamom through the ports of his kingdom, and this allowed local merchants from trading with the company. So in a way nobody actually won, it was a draw. The third Anglo-Mysore War was fought between 1790 to 1792. It was again under the leadership of Tipu Sultan, but this time France was an ally of Mysore. Tipu Sultan established a close relationship with the French in India and modernized his army. Together, they invaded Travancore, which was British ally. Mysore lost its capital, Seringapatam, to the company. So here the company won and they acquired the capital city of Mysore. In this picture, you can see how British took away 2 of Tipu Sultan's sons as hostage. The fourth and the last Anglo-Mysore War was fought in 1799. In this, Tipu Sultan died because the East India Company saw the alliance of Mysore and the French as a threat. Napoleon Bonaparte was a French military leader. He was posted in Egypt during 1799, and even the British had a presence in Egypt. So Tipu Sultan wrote letters to Napoleon, and in return Napoleon assured his support to Tipu against the British in India. This was definitely a threat to the East India Company, so the company asked help from the Maratha Empire and the Nizam of Hyderabad. Mysore was attacked from all 4 sides. Tipu was shot and killed in the capital city of Seringapatam. So this way, from 1767 to 1799, the East India Company fought 4 wars with Mysore, and finally killing Tipu Sultan in the 4th Anglo-Mysore War of 1799. Warren Hastings was the Governor General from 1773 to 1785. After him, Lord Cornwallis became the Governor General from 1786 to 1793, and his successor was Lord Wellesley from 1798 to 1825. So it was during Lord Wellesley's tenure, Tipu Sultan was killed, and the company expanded its rule in Mysore. So just now we spoke about the company's rule in Mysore and how they defeated Tipu Sultan with the help of Marathas and Nizam of Hyderabad. Now here is the clever part. The company even fought wars with the Marathas. To maintain their power, the British used political warfare as their means to take down their opponents. From the late 1700s, the company wanted to curb and eventually destroy Maratha power. Maratha Empire was a Hindu warrior group that emerged from the western Deccan Plateau, which is present-day Maharashtra. They had dreams of ruling India from Delhi just like the Mughals. Maratha Empire was divided into many states under different chiefs. In this map you can see how the Maratha Empire had so much land territory under their control. So naturally they were under the radar of the East India Company, because the company pursued an aggressive policy of territorial expansion. They wanted to acquire as much territory as possible to establish their rule in India. And if you see, the Mughals, the Marathas and the Mysore kingdom had most of the land territory that the British went aggressively behind with their political and diplomatic methods. After the end of Third Battle of Panipat in 1761, the East India Company had an eye on the Maratha Empire. Because in the Third Battle of Panipat, the Marathas were defeated by the King of Afghanistan, Ahmad Shah Abdali. We have already seen that the 1757 Battle of Plassey was the first major war that the company had won on Indian soil. So the company got so much confidence that it thereafter went on several wars with the Indian rulers, like Battle of Buxar, First Anglo-Mysore War, etc. So it is natural that they also had an eye on the Maratha Empire after their defeat in 1761 Battle of Panipat. The company fought three wars against the Maratha Empire under the name Anglo-Maratha Wars. The first one took place in between 1775 to 1782. 1775 was also the time when the company had acquired enough power in India. They even rolled out many administrative policies. By this time, the first Governor General position was created. Then the first Supreme Court was established. This all tells us that by 1775, the company had expanded its rule in many regions of India. So we should not be surprised that now the company went on war against the Marathas. The first Anglo-Maratha War started with Treaty of Surat and ended with the Treaty of Salbai. The second Anglo-Maratha War took place in between 1803 to 1805. It ended with the British acquiring several parts of Odisha. And the third Anglo-Maratha War took place between 1817 to 1818. This was the final and decisive conflict between the British East India Company and the Maratha Empire in India. The war crushed the Maratha power. The Peshwa was removed and sent away to Bithur near Kanpur with a pension. The company now had complete control over the territories of Mysore, Hyderabad, Lucknow, Pune, Travancore, Cochin and many other princely states. Now if you see, during the first Anglo-Maratha War, the Governor General Warren Hastings was in office. He left office in 1785. Then Lord Cornwallis came in 1786. He was there till 1793. After Cornwallis, it was John Shore from 1793 to 98. After him, Richard Wellesley was the Governor General from 1798 to 1805. So the Second Anglo-Maratha War took place under the leadership of Governor General Richard Wellesley. And he left office as soon as the battle got over. And in the Third Anglo-Maratha War, Francis Hastings was the Governor General. So don't mistake him with Warren Hastings. They both have the same last name, but they are two different people. If you look at the timeline, so far the company went to war against so many rulers, and the victories behind these wars gave enough confidence to the company that now the company claimed that its authority was supreme. That means its power was greater than that of any Indian states. Now in order to be a supreme power, the company had to take a step towards bringing the Indian kingdoms within the boundary of the British political power, basically annex them. Meaning of the word annex is to join or add. So to add the Indian states, the company came up with a policy called Subsidiary Alliance. According to the terms of this alliance, Indian rulers were not allowed to have their own independent armed forces. They were to be protected by the company, and in return the rulers had to pay for the subsidiary forces. If the Indian rulers failed to make the payment, then part of the territory was taken away as penalty. Now let's get to know a little more about Subsidiary Alliance. The doctrine of subsidiary alliance was framed by Lord Wellesley, the Governor General of British India from 1798 to 1805. So if you see the timeline between 1798 to 1805, it was the time when the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War got over, as well as the Second Anglo-Maratha War took place. It was during this time the policy of subsidiary alliance was introduced. And if you want an exact date, as in which year exactly it was introduced, then I believe it had to be in 1799, when the company won the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, in which Tipu Sultan was killed. Because soon after that war, the Mysore kingdom was placed under the Vodeyar dynasty. Now if the company fought a war and then made another dynasty in charge of it, then it had to do so with certain conditions, right? It cannot be a charity. So that was the first incident when the company officially rolled out the subsidiary alliance policy. So the date 1799 fits well because that time Lord Wellesley was the Governor General and subsidiary alliance is a creation of Governor General Lord Wellesley. Now unofficially, the Nawab of Awadh, that is Shujaud-Daulah, was the first to enter into a subsidiary alliance after the 1764 Battle of Buxar. Now I'm not trying to confuse you over here, I just want you to think critically, because in one hand, the policy of subsidiary alliance was framed by Lord Wellesley, about whom we clearly know that he was the Governor General from 1798 to 1805, and on the other, we know that in 1764 Battle of Buxar, three parties fought against the company. If you recollect, it was the Nawab of Bengal, Mir Qasim, then the Nawab of Awadh, Shujaud-Daulah, and the Mughal Emperor of that time, Shah Alam II. And we know that the company won the war. It acquired Diwani of Bengal. Officially, Bengal was under the company's control. But what about Awadh? The company did not do anything to Shujaud-Daulah. Instead, they forced him to enter into an alliance, and that was the first instance of subsidiary alliance. In the late 1830s, the East India Company became worried about Russia. It imagined that Russia might expand across Asia and enter India from northwest. Driven by this fear, the British now wanted to secure their control over the northwest. They fought a long war against Afghanistan under the name First Anglo-Afghan War. That was fought between 1838 to 1842. The British won the war and established indirect company rule there. Sindh was taken over in 1843. Next in line was Punjab, because if you see, it clearly lies in the boundary, but the presence of Maharaja Ranjit Singh held back the company. After his death in 1839, almost immediately, his kingdom began to fall into disorder. Two wars were fought with the Sikh kingdom under the name the First Anglo-Sikh War and the Second Anglo-Sikh War. The First Anglo-Sikh War was fought between the Sikh Empire and the East India Company between 1845 and 1846. It resulted in partial domination of the East India Company in the Sikh kingdom. Although the Sikh army was weakened by the war, British interference in the Sikh government led to the Second Anglo-Sikh War within 3 years. The Second Anglo-Sikh War took place in 1848 and 1849. It resulted in the subjugation of the Sikh Empire and the annexation of the Punjab, and what subsequently became the Northwest Frontier Province by the East India Company. Henry Hardinge was the Governor General during the time of the First Anglo-Sikh War, and Lord Dalhousie was the Governor General during the Second Anglo-Sikh War. Soon after the end of Second Anglo-Sikh War, Governor General Dalhousie introduced a policy that came to be known as Doctrine of Lapse. This policy was an upgraded version of subsidiary alliance policy because if you remember, in subsidiary alliance, the Indian rulers were not allowed to have their own forces. They were forced to depend on the company forces for any kind of protection, and that too in exchange of payment. And according to this new policy of Doctrine of Lapse, if an Indian ruler died without a male successor, his kingdom would lapse and would become part of company's territory. One kingdom after another was annexed simply by applying this new policy. For example, Satara district of Maharashtra was took over in 1848, then Sambalpur state of Odisha was taken over in 1850, then Udaipur was taken over in 1852, followed by Nagpur in 1853, and then Jhansi in 1854. The famous story of Jhansi Ki Rani tells us about how she was ordered to leave the palace and fort of Jhansi because her son Damodar Rao was adopted and was not her biological son. So the East India Company applied the Doctrine of Lapse policy and took over her state and territories. And finally in 1856 the company took over the states of Awadh. Remember, Awadh was already an alliance of the company, but in 1856 the British took over Awadh. Governor General Lord Dalhousie said it was due to the misgovernance of the ruler Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, as he was not ruling properly. So to free the people from the misgovernment of the Nawab, the British had to take over the state. Wajid Ali Shah was 10th and the last Nawab of Awadh. He held the position for 9 years. The British humiliated the Nawab and he was removed and sent to Kolkata on a pension. Seeing this, it enraged the people of Awadh, who later joined the Great Revolt that broke out in 1857. This revolt was also known as the Sepoy Mutiny and also India's first struggle for independence. The revolt of 1857 saw the end of the East India Company's rule in India. On August 2nd, 1858, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act 1858. Under this act, the company was formally dissolved and its ruling powers over India were transferred to the British Crown. In other words, from here on, the era of the new British Raj started, which lasted until partition of India in 1947, about which we will learn in a separate video. I'd like to say something very quickly. In the beginning, I didn't know whether if I could pull off a video like this, wherein I'll explain history in a story format, putting events in chronological order, then adding colors to the timeline, interlinking events, and connecting the dots. I mean, that's how learning becomes fun and simple. So I hope you all liked it and enjoyed watching it, because I certainly did, and there was a lot of effort and time that went into it. And I'll leave it up to you to decide whether it's worth it or not. So if you liked the video, hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comment section. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.